Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Commander Clash podcast, where the Commander Clash crew discusses Commander-related topics, and today we are going to be talking about stacks in Commander. Stacks is always a controversial issue in Commander. Some people hate it, some people are neutral about it, some people love it. So we want to talk about the role of stacks in Commander and the perception of stacks and, what its role is and whether or not we should be running more of it or less of it and the nuance behind that. Joining me, as always, for this discussion is site owner Richard. How's it going, Richard?
Hey, Tomer. How's it going?
Going well. Next up, we got Seth, probably better known as Saffron Olive. How's it going, Seth?
I'm doing well. How are you, Tomer?
Doing well. And Krim, also known as the Asian Avenger. How's it going, Krim?
It's going all right. I'm a little under the weather, but pretty good.
Well, we're gonna perk you right up with one of your favorite topics, which is Stacks Mount.
It's not a bad one.
All right. And before we jump into the discussion at hand, two things you can do to support the channel. One is you can go over to the MTG Goldfish merch store, mtggoldfishmerch.com. You can purchase all the beautiful playmats stapled to Richard's wall. You can purchase deck boxes, deck sleeves, t-shirts, and so much more over at mtggoldfishmerch.com. And the other way you can support this podcast is you can like and subscribe at whatever platform you're listening to this to. So if you're on YouTube, you can like and subscribe there. If you're on Spotify, Apple, wherever you're listening to, like and subscribe. It helps the podcast grow and continue to do more episodes. All right, now let's jump into the topic at hand, stacks. And the first thing we have to do, just to start talking about stacks, is we have to define it. So very loose definition here. The definition that we're going to be sticking to is basically any card or any strategy that is focused on resource denial, stopping your opponents from, accessing as much resources as they want to. You can stack them in terms of card draw, limiting the amount of cards they can draw. You can stack them in terms of how much mana they can produce on a single turn, either by blowing up some of their lands and artifacts or limiting them some other sort of way, what colors they can access to. You can limit their access to certain cards, like the card in your command zone, for example. There's a lot of different ways of staxing, but basically it all boils down to resource denial. You're slowing down your opponent from accessing the resources that they want to have access to. So with that out of the way, now we're got to talk about stacks in Commander. A lot of people don't like stacks in Commander. Why do you think that is?
People like to goldfish in solitaire. Problem solved. Like right there. Like they love popping off and they don't want anything to disrupt that.
People want to play Magic. When you sit down to play a game of Commander, your idea is to actually play a game of Magic, not to sit there while your cards don't do what you wanted them to do, and your opponent just keeps you from doing anything. So I think that's why it's disliked. It makes complete sense to me that people would dislike it, especially in Commander, where the ethos of the format is it's supposed to be this casual, anything goes, play whatever you like kind of thing. So I think it doubly makes sense that Commander players would especially not like stacks.
I agree with Seth. I think people just want to play Magic and they don't want to be slowed down, whatever that means, right? So you may still be able to play your game of Magic. If there was a permanent Thalia on the board where you just delayed everything, you just wasted everyone's time slightly, right? So people can still play their stuff, but it's slower and they don't like that. They want to in and out, do what they came to do, and then go home. So yeah, I think most people just dislike stacks. And then there's also just the terrible feel bads of you doing literally nothing. That is possibly the worst thing that could happen to you. You sit down for a game of Commander and you do nothing and you watch people have fun for 2 hours and you cannot leave because you are not technically dead, right? You can't go grab food or anything. You got to sit there and watch and pretend to be happy about it, right? So yeah, I think people are justified in not being happy about stacks when they get stacked, right? And there is a question of maybe you shouldn't let yourself get stacked, which I'm sure we'll talk about shortly.
So I have a question for folks. It seems like, at least in the community, a lot of people dislike stacks. And I think I think the things you touch upon is right. Like, people want to see their deck do their thing. They want to play Magic when they sit down to play a game of Magic, and that entails, casting their spells and doing what the deck wants to be doing. But I don't see that much hate in terms of, say, spot removal or even a board wipe, like a Wrath of God effect. People are much more salty of a Stax piece, whereas they seem to be less salty about straight up just like, killing your commander, blowing up your army and stuff like that. Why do you think there's a distinction there, or what is the distinction there?
I mean, we've talked about this in 60 card formats for a long time, that I think it's mostly a psychological thing. Like, because you're 100% right. Players, if they play their creature and you Doomblade it, most players are fine with that. On the other hand, if they play their creature and you counter it, or if you cast a Thoughtseize and take the creature out of their hand and they never get a chance to cast it, people get way more saltier about that. And I think it's because if you cast your creature, even if it gets Wrath, even if it gets destroyed, you feel like you're still executing your game plan. You're kind of like, oh, well, it's a bummer that it didn't really work out, but I'm doing my thing. I'll get him next time. When if you don't even get the opportunity to like have your creature hit the battlefield or even attempt to cast it because you're getting staxed or discarded or countered, that feels a lot worse to a lot of people, I think. That's my theory.
That's the counterspell theory, right? Like, people hate counterspells even though it's just removal. I don't know. That's just the way it is, and you have to plan around it. Like, people just dislike the card not existing for a split second on the battlefield. It's just human psychology. I don't know what to say about it. It doesn't make any sense, right?
Yeah.
I don't think I should. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I'll just not say anything on this. It's fine.
I actually have a question. Do you guys actually feel that difference between Counterspell and Doomblade? Is it a seasoned player versus a new player thing, or do you still feel bad that they ripped the Counterspell on your non-ETB creature versus they Doomblade it? I know Crim's immune to this because he is the one casting the Counterspell. But I'm curious if you guys actually get tilted or affected by this in any way.
In general, no. Although, if it does happen, it's when all of my stuff's getting countered. Like, if I cast a creature and you counter it / kill it, no difference to me. Doesn't make any difference. But if I'm playing against mono blue Curious Obsession and you literally just counter everything I play, it does start to build up. And maybe I would feel the same way, but I don't. Because if I play against Control and they just like Doomblade all my creatures and Wrath my board, it doesn't impact me the same way. So there are, I guess, situations where I even find myself falling into that like faulty line of thinking. But it's got to be a pretty extreme matchup where I'm getting a lot of my stuff countered for me to start to feel that way.
I guess for me, sometimes I do think it feels like if every single spell I'm getting countered, that it can get a little bit tilting. I don't know. As a Pauper player back in the day, I used to thrive in like mono blue control matchups where literally it was a counter war, and that's like why you play the game, like 3 hour counter wars. But like, I don't know, when you're in Commander, sometimes, and also now that I'm much older, it's been a decade, my patience for like just not being able to do anything when I sit at the table is higher. And I guess with removal, I guess there's more avenues for you to still get around removal and get some effect out of your cards. Like, if you play a creature and it gets Doombladed, well, if I had an ETB creature, then I still got that trigger. If the removal spell was Sorcerer Speed, then I still got to have it on board. Maybe I got to attack because it had haste. And I also probably have like protection spells. Maybe I have like a way to protect against a removal spell, whereas I don't have as many ways of protecting against a counter magic. So, like, there could be some things that could make it more salty, that more unfair. But, like, I think it's mostly psychological. Like, I don't think there's a noticeable difference between having a creature that is cast and enters the battlefield, it has no effect on the board state whatsoever, and it gets removed before it gets any value, whereas you just counter it because the effect is the same. It's just whether it's stopped on the stack or whether it's stopped on the battlefield.
So isn't it better to be stacked then? Because you keep the card in your hand and it doesn't die as opposed to being countered or Doombladed? Wouldn't you rather be stacked? It keeps the creature off the board but in your hand? Like, why does that feel bad then?
I'm gonna clear my throat here because I'm gonna go off.
Krim, do you have anything to add to this conversation?
Oh, I've got a lot to add to this conversation. Okay, so I'm gonna be very honest with you. So like I think that it is all psychological, right? Just recently, not too long ago, multiple people in the community, some with pretty decent sized following, have had some issues with board wipes. Right, and they posted some stuff about it, and they're like, "Wow, board wipes, yada yada." And then I was like, "Okay, sure, maybe this person doesn't like board wipes. I don't like ramp. I get it. Okay, cool." I go into the comment section, and that's where I see it pop off. I was like, "Yeah, this is the worst thing ever. I was playing this game, and somebody just blew up my board state." I'm like, "Dude, really? like, how are you upset about that? Like, you were going off. Like, why are you upset about this? Board wipes and counter spells and all these things need to happen because sometimes there's just things like, example, if I Doomblade a Thoracle, doesn't do anything, right? like if I Doomblade I don't know, something that a Bane of Progress doesn't do anything, right? So there are things where you just need to interact with them on the stack. So basically, when you go into a game of Magic, you should expect that your stuff, you do stuff, you get interacted with. You should get interacted with. I know that people go into games wanting it to like be like, I'm gonna go off and do my thing and you're gonna do your thing. But I think that a game is a lot like a puzzle, right? As I had mentioned before. And that doesn't mean it's CDH. There's a difference here, right? Like CDH is like if I were like, yeah, I wanted the puzzle, but I want the puzzle to be like Elden Ring or something like that, right? But like the thing here is you could still have puzzles in a casual level game. And I think that the problem is that a lot of people just don't want their stuff blown up and just want to go off. That, if I'm being completely honest, they just want to go off, and that's the problem. And I think that as I'm reading the comments and I lurk on the internet and I read the YouTube comments, more like I'm known as the I wouldn't say I think some people, I've read some comments, they're like, Krim's not a fun first guy, and trust me, I'm a fun first guy. I'm a fun first guy, but I think that there is a fine line between fun and just like letting people just win, right? Like if I want to just let people win, I just I wouldn't play the game, right? I don't know. I that's a difference in like ideology and philosophies within the gameplay though, and I know that. But like I just think that Magic is better when you can interact, and like I know people are upset when like people get interacted with on the stack more than they are with Doomblades, but I think they're essentially the same thing. There's just things that need to die and things that shouldn't hit the board, right? So I don't know. I look at it the same way. They're the same thing.
I mean, I agree with Krim to some extent. Like, wraths are definitely necessary. Like, Commander would be much worse if wraths didn't exist. Counter spells are necessary. There'd be combos that would be super unbeatable if they didn't exist. So I think that, like, in moderation, all of those things are positive. But I think they can also, like, tip over when you sit down and you play against a deck that's just like, okay, I'm gonna opposition agent you so you can't tutor. I'm gonna use counters on everything you cast. I'm gonna play Nevenerol in Wrath 10 times and just like you're not gonna make any progress towards a game of Magic. Like, I think that actively feels bad. So I think it's gotta be like a moderation type thing for me. Like, there's very few cards in Commander, even Stax Pieces, that I would consider like fully off limits, like just never play them. I think that your deck probably should have some number of ways to hate on what your opponent's doing, stop what your opponent's doing. But when you go super far and your deck is like a Shadow Mage Infiltrator as your win con, and everything else is just like staxing and countering and killing, I don't even especially enjoy playing against that style of deck, and I'm like less casual than some random new Commander player. So I could see why like someone who's just picking up the format with a precon or something would really not enjoy that that kind of matchup.
I don't even like. I also think like the idea of like feels bad, right? Like I don't know, feels bad is like that's kind of. I think that feels bad are like kind of why we have this gray area, right? Because they're like the idea, like when you sit down and you play the game, I think that removal and like even if they go heavy on like one end of counterspell and removal, right? Like that's fine. Like their weaknesses lie in the fact that they're all 1-for-1s, right? And they're all 1-for-1s, and in a multiplayer game, you will lose the game if you 1-for-1. So like I think they're like that's where it balances itself out. So I guess I don't see the issue if like someone does load up on counter spells. Like think about it. Like when y'all play with me, like I get overwhelmed easily because I 1-for-1, right? And like 1-for-1s isn't great in a 4-person game. So I don't know. I don't think that Stax is, just like to tie it all back, like I don't even think Stax is really that bad because they rely on these pieces that stay on the board, but if you interact with those exact same pieces, they also just fold. They can't do anything.
I mean, I don't think it's up for debate, right? I think Stax, most people dislike it. But for the same reason, like most people dislike a counterspell versus Doomblade. Like I think that's like an actual fact. But I think Krim's point is like, should it be a feels bad and should we optimize for it, right? Is a game of Commander a cooperative game or a player versus player game? Like when I play League of Legends, I'm not optimizing for my opponent's fun. I'm smashing them into the ground and enjoying every moment of it. I'm not caring like, oh, let me let this guy get a kill because otherwise he feels like he's not playing League of Legends, right? Like I'm not thinking like that at all, right? But in Commander, should we have the slot? Like, should I be like, oh, I need the rest of the pod to pop off and I will pop off harder? Or should I grind them all into the ground and dance on their corpse, right? Because 1v1 Magic is like that, right? You know, like people very happily stacks you into the ground 1v1 and be like, you shouldn't play that combo deck. Sucks to be you, right? I outplayed you, right? But when you do that in Commander, I think it's frowned upon, right? Like, so is that correct? Like, is Commander somehow a 4-player co-op game? Or is it actually PvP?
Right. It sounds. Cause it doesn't sound like the way people want Commander to go is that it's PvP. They want it to be like playing Ascension, right? They want it to be like a deck building game, and you do your thing, and then you just play. Like at that point, then you just need like Commander should just have some kind of river or some kind of NPC aspect that's PvE, right? Like Arch Enemy.
Yeah. Where it's like, there's like a Bolas. Isn't there like
there's an Arch Enemy
where, like, you have
Bolas, right?
There is, and you're like.
Yeah, exactly.
Like
so like
fun.
when I think of like playing games, like if there's ever another person, it doesn't matter how many. If it's a multiplayer, it's like I think optimizing for the least amount of feel bads. It's fine if you like want to if you want to talk power level. That's a different thing, right? Like power level is the same as like okay, well I understand I'm in bronze rank, so why am I going to go play with a bunch of legends, right? like I get that. So, but like, yeah, like I just think that optimizing and worrying about feel bads is kind of weird. It's the constants why we're in this flux, right? Like we're in this weird area.
I mean, go ahead, Domer.
Well, like I feel like it really depends on the mentality, like what you want to sign up for in terms of like gameplay experience, because I do feel like casual Commander is very much not so much, or at least for me, it's not so much winning as so much you're just trying to get an experience out of it. And that's like very vague, but I'm trying to give it more concrete substance by saying like I think a lot of people at casual tables, they brought a deck that they're excited for. They probably don't have a lot of time or a lot of opportunities to play it like we do. Like we play weekly. I play twice a week even. I do stream and Commander Clash. So I don't really care if I don't have a non-game every once in a while. But I think people who have like, they have 1 day a week or maybe 1 day every other week that they get a chance to try out their new Commander. They just build it. They're super psyched for it. And they just want to see the deck like do its own thing. And if there's like a bunch of stacks at the table and they're not allowed to like even test out their cards, then it might feel unfulfilling to sit down and play with it. And I totally get like I get that idea in casual games. At CEDH, I don't think anybody has gotten salty about stacks ever when I've sat down and played with them, because like you're in a competitive mindset. So like even for me, like if you like Winter Orb and you Drannith Magistrate, like I'm expecting these things and I view it as a puzzle like Krim usually does. In 1v1, absolutely. Like I bring on the stacks. Like I want to see the best decks. I want to see my deck being up against the best decks. That's the whole point. But at casual mindset, there's like a flip that kind of switches sometimes for me, where I just want to see like what my cool deck, what I want my deck to do. And if I don't get that chance to do
problem, right?
Yeah.
Like the fact that there's this divide, like, okay, well, you can't have a casual deck that like is full on, like, that is interactive, essentially. People have that misconception where it's like, well, if you want to solve a puzzle, go play CDH, right? Like, it's like, well, I don't think that's entirely true.
Because there's like bad Stax decks. Like you played Descent into Madness. Like I don't think that's
That card's
CDH All-Star.
bad. It's hilariously
Yeah.
bad. But
I mean,
yeah.
I think a lot of our decks have interaction though. Like if you look at our Commander Clash decks, like there's some RAS and there's some removal.
right.
It's just like we're not like, actively usually trying to stacks each other, playing like full blown control. For me, it's more the co-op thing, honestly. Like, that's how I view Commander, and it's very separate from how I view the rest of Magic. Like, I'm the biggest Blood Moon supporter in the world. Nothing I love more in a 60-card format than stacking someone. I live for that stuff. But when it comes to Commander, I just, I can't get behind it. Blood Moon's, my favorite card, and I just won't play it in Commander because I do want it to be this collaborative experience where everyone, has a good time. That's my number one overall goal is, I'm going to get together with my buddies. We're going to hang out for a couple hours. We're just going to have a good social experience more so than winning or stopping someone necessarily from winning. So that's kind of how I view it. The other thing I want to mention that I think is different is in 1v1 formats, if someone goes, turn one, Mox into Soul Land into Blood Moon, and I'm like, or Trinosphere, and I'm just like, I can't do anything. I just scoop. The game's over. But you can't really do that in a 4-player game. It's not accepted. It's not how Commander works. It's not like you can just stacks me, and I'm like, okay, I'm done with this. I'm gonna go on to the next game in my league or whatever. So I think that's another reason that stacks feels especially bad, because you don't have that easy out of just being like, okay, I'm going to scoop on turn 2 since you got me. You got me this time. Let's go on to the next one.
Even if you concede, there's still 3 other people at the table. It's not like you can jump into your next game. Now you have to wait until they finish. So even that even also stigmatizes leaving too, because why are you even leaving if you can't even join a second game? You might as well stick it out and give the other people more of an opportunity to get around the Stax Pieces.
Yeah, I mean, I think Commander is co-op, and I don't know how this idea got in my head, right? But if someone is mana screwed, the correct really spike answer is probably just finish them off when they got nothing going on, right? But you don't, right? You leave them alone. Maybe you secret rendezvous them to get them back in the game, and they might kill you later on, right? But there's some empathy there where you're like, let me boost this guy up, and that's co-op. Right? Whereas the correct answer might be, let me take one combat phase to finish him off to get him out of here and end his misery and go on, right? So there
I don't think that's correct, though.
Element.
Or mulligans.
I don't know where it came from, though. Right?
I don't think it's correct to kill the player that's down, though, right? You want to make an ally out of that person.
The weakest one?
Yeah. No, right.
I mean, you could, right? But I think a lot of the times you could just all swing in for lethal and remove them and then not worry about the threat of them coming back later, which they usually win. That's usually me, right? And while you guys deploy all your stuff, I come back later and then win, right? There is a risk to that, right? But then you feel bad because he hasn't cast any cards and he's playing some 9 mana 10/10, but 20 turns later, that 9 mana 10/10 is probably going to kill you, right? So you leave him around. So I don't know, and I'm the most Staxy. I love stacks in 1v1 formats, and I love Armageddon, but in Commander for some reason I find these unacceptable, right? And
except for Lattice Luck, you monster.
Yeah, I mean I play them once in a while. I still like them, right? But I recognize I only play in our groups as well, right? And this has something to do with try-harding. If I have a stacks deck and I'm going to FNM and I'm playing casually, I will not break it out against any player, right? I'll only play it against people I know who are there to win. If it's a casual person, I won't stacks them out. I won't play my control deck against them, right? I'll play some dirtily deck, right? I'll hold my punches, and maybe that's what Commander is. We're not try-harding, otherwise we'd be playing CDH, so maybe we shouldn't be bringing the stacks. I don't know, right? There's just that mentality. I don't know where it came from.
I kind of want to, the only proponent for stacks in those, sometimes, if everybody's just trying to pop off and trying to have their fun, what if having fun just means winning the game? What if if your deck is doing the thing, if your deck pops off, it just immediately wins? Let's say you're a Storm deck, for example. You don't necessarily have to be a CDH Storm deck. Let's say you're just playing Is Mizzix of this Magnus, which came out in a precon or whatever, and you upgraded it a little bit. and you have all these instant sorceries that are very hard to interact with, and you have counter magic to protect your commander, and you just sling a bunch of instant sorceries together, and whenever you get to pop off, you win the game. If you're outside of blue, it's very hard to interact with the instants of sorceries, and it might be difficult to kill the one creature that they're trying their hardest to protect. Would it be good then to add some Stax elements just to prolong the game a little bit longer so that, they still can pop off if they can, but like, if they just pop off and they just win, isn't that kind of like a reverse tax? It's like you shuffle up, you try to play the game, somebody pops off, immediately wins, and you're like, okay, well, I didn't get to cast any spells because we didn't get to prolong the game and long enough for me to cast them, so we'll shuffle up, we'll do it again. Oh, I didn't get to cast any spells this game too because the guy popped off and won immediately. So maybe Stax can kind of be useful as a way to slow it down so people can cast their spells in a weird way.
So I think, yeah, but I think it depends on the kind of Stax. There's a huge range when it comes to Stax cards, from really miserable, like look at the saltiest cards on EDH when you see like stasises and winter orbs and static orbs and these like no one's doing anything cards. And then there's a lot of cards that I think I would still consider them Stax pieces that aren't that brutal but still do a good job of doing what you were just saying, Tomer. Like for example, against the Storm deck, something like Archon of Emiria or Thalia is really effective. I think those are like very legitimate cards that people should probably be playing more of. Or like if I'm playing my Panharmonicon deck and you have a Hushbringer that shuts down ETB triggers, like I'm perfectly fine with that. So there's some level of Stax, or if you even consider those Stax pieces, but some level of interaction that I'm fine with. Like even Opposition Agent, I know we meme on it a lot, but Opposition Agent is a card that I'm perfectly fine with people playing because it hates on something. So I think for me, it's the Stax pieces that keep people from doing anything that I especially find problematic. Like no one's doing anything. If you're hating on the graveyard, or you're hating on ETB triggers, or you're hating on casting multiple spells in a turn, for me, all of that is fair game. And I think even like you were saying, healthy for the format, at least in some matchups, like because it wouldn't be fun if everyone was just storming off on turn 3 every game. Like that's just as miserable as no one doing anything, because you're doing nothing in a different way, but it's the end result is actually very similar.
So would you consider Rest in Peace a Stax piece?
I mean, I don't know.
Is, right?
Where is the line? I don't know where the line is when I think of Stax. Like the first thing that comes into my head is like Trinispheres and Chalice of the Voids and Stasises and Blood Moons, things that are like, you can't cast spells, you don't have mana. Is Rip a Stax piece? Maybe, but I would argue that Rip is fair game. Like I as far as Commander, like I don't know. Am I off base there? Am I too spiky if I'm jamming a Rip against a random table because someone might be a Reanimator deck?
Well, I think Leyline and Rip, or Leyline of the Void,
Rip
sorry,
is Stax piece.
Is like, and Leyline of the Void is more of a Stax piece too, right? Like, so I would say those are Stax pieces.
Well, it doesn't just shut down your graveyard, but it also shuts down sacrifice
triggers. Dying.
So any death triggers, if you're like any deck that cares about death triggers, sacrifice triggers, or no, sacrifice still works. Death triggers is not. So like your Solemn, if your Solemn dies, well, it's not dying, it's getting exiled, so you don't get to draw that card, I believe, if I'm understanding the wording correctly.
Yeah, it does not. The replacement effect goes into effect, and it does not die. So it gets exiled. It does
stop you from playing the game.
Right, so it effectively stops a deck that relies on dying, like let's say not Glenolendra, but the Black-White Vampire.
Like a Blood Artist deck or something.
Sure, Blood Artist, whatever, any of those. So like those cards are Stax pieces then, right?
So I think Rip gets a pass because basically graveyard decks are so powerful and broken that when you play this hate against them, people are okay with it. But when you play like an anti-spell card, right, like a Thalia, and it's affecting rampant growth, you get really pissed, right? You're like, I'm just rampant growthing, right? And I actually hard disagree with Seth. I think if you started with the Rule of Law emblem, one spell per turn, or a Thalia, every spell costs 1 more at the beginning of every Commander game, like most players would just quit. Like I think that innocuous Stax is actually still very annoying, right? And a part of it is like, if you play a 1v1 game, your deck is like 50% answers, 60% answers, right? If you're a combo deck, you have combo pieces, and then the rest of your deck is made around protecting your combo. If you take a casual commander deck, you have what, 5 pieces of removal, right? Maybe 10 if you're lucky that can hit whatever hate piece is on you. Like, your odds of getting it are not good. And especially if the taxing thing is taxing your way of getting the answer. Like, you know, if you're trying to tutor up the answered opposition agent and you have like one answer in your deck, you're screwed. It's over for you, right? Like, you're doing nothing. So I think like the way casual decks are built, you know, is a problem, right? Like CDH decks don't have this problem, right? They also are packing like way more answers and protection to get through these, you know, Stax pieces, whereas casual decks are not. And then what you'll end up is with all your casual decks being serious decks, right? Because it's all removal interaction and then like 2 finishers. And that's how you have to play the game to get rid of Stax. So I would die if Rule of Law started on the battlefield like every game. Like you cannot say that's a fun format.
I don't know about casual decks not running that much removal, though. I feel like, at least from my experiences, I would consider like a stream's pretty casual, maybe like mid-power. And even the precons, like when I do a precon upgrade whenever a new precon comes out, and I will count up the amount of removal spells, target removal spells, and board wipes. And my checklist is usually I
what
want
if
to
it's
see
like artifact removal? How many artifact removal spells do you have to get rid of Ensnaring Bridge?
Yeah,
right?
you only have like maybe 3 things that can hit an Ensnaring Bridge.
So
that's
3
true.
out of 99 cards you need to get to play your game, right?
Well, you
Like,
also
that's
get
the
to
problem.
draw cards, so you get to see more. Like, it is
maybe.
harder to get.
But then there's a
specific
Notion
things.
Thief. Or then there's a opposition agent, so then you can't actually do that. I mean, yeah, I think part of the problem is, do we expect people to optimize to beat these cards? I think that's like the yes or no question for me. We could like optimize if someone's playing Trinispheres and Stasises. You can build all of your commander decks in a way that you're going to be able to deal with those things, just like you do in Modern or whatever. Like decks can build to beat whatever hate cards are good against their archetype. But is that what we want the format to be about? Do we want people to be like, okay, I'm going to have to dedicate 20 slots of my deck to deal with the Blood Moon person. I'm going to have to dedicate 20 slots of my deck because someone might play this against me. Like, does that make the format more enjoyable for people? And I think the answer for most people, excluding CEDH, because I think that's part of like how CEDH works, but for casual players, I think the answer is no for most people. Like, sure, you could make Commander that way, but I think that makes the format less fun rather than more fun.
I mean, I consistently do that though, right? Because if I know that my archetype
your deck is only answers though, Krim.
right. And you see, but like it has ways to win, right? But like in all honesty, or like all my decks, like example, like if I know that I have something that I cannot beat, right? Like if rogues do require you to have a graveyard, but if someone has a rip, my rogues do nothing, right? So you should have planned for that. Because if that is the one thing your deck is weak to, I don't think you should be upset and salty that someone just plays it, right? Like, I think you should plan for it. Like, example, like if my Super Friends deck loses to an Immortal Sun, right? Like, I should plan for that, right? Like, I'm not saying that you need to hate out everything, but like, what is the absolute worst thing that you need to plan for, right?
But
and
should
that's
you
what
plan
I
for an
to.
Armageddon coming down on turn 4?
I mean, I do. I never draw more than 3 lands. So what are you going to do? Like set me back
Right,
to
like you can, right? You can sandbag lands, you can hold them.
I do,
and you
though.
can have,
I do that.
You know, you have the counter spell
why I never
for the
go past
constant
3.
mists. You have the, you know, whatever to get rid of Ensnaring Bridge. You're holding lands in case someone Armageddons, and like you essentially stacks yourself. Like I don't know, like you have so many answers that you can't play the game anymore because you got to be ready for every one of these.
It's fun. Like playing with Vince, right? Like, so I always expect a random LD spell, right? So I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to hold some lands just in case. And you've seen this on Clash. I'm going to hold some because I think Vince has got one.
It could also just be like, if you're in a meta where you know, let's say you're a green ramp deck. You're a green ramp deck, and you decided your ramp package is all going to be lane ramp. And you're in a meta that you know opposition agents rampant, and I don't know, some other land hate is rampant. You could just diversify your ramp package where you could be like, okay, instead of running 13 land ramp cards, I'll run 7 land ramp cards, and I'll run 6 mana rocks. because green still has access to those things, and
Right.
that way you're kind of hedging your bets. Where if you do get LD'd, or if you get artifact removal, like if you get Vandal Blasted, okay, you don't lose all your mana sources, your extra mana sources, and if you get Opposition Agent, you're not shut out of all your ramp spells. You're only shut out of half of each of these situations.
Right.
But is that how you want to play Commander? Or you want to
No,
be like, I
nobody
want to
wants to
cast
play like that.
Avengers
Nobody wants to play
Zendikar
like
and make
that.
plans. Yeah,
nobody
right?
wants to
Or
do
you
that.
want to sit here and think of the 8,000 possibilities of everyone locking you out of the game forever,
And
right?
Well,
And I think it's reflected in the gameplay as well. Like, if you've ever played like a 60 card format, there's times when you draw your sideboard counter spell and you know that you can't let a certain thing resolve. So instead of like running out your whatever planeswalker, running out your creature, like, okay, I gotta pass. I would love to like add these things to my battlefield, but there's a chance they're gonna have this combo piece that beats me, this Stax piece that beats me. So I'm gonna do nothing this turn, and I'm gonna pass, and I'm gonna
That's part of the
leave up
fun.
this counter, and
I've
that's
done
part
that.
of the fun.
Yeah.
But I don't think I would enjoy that in Commander. In Commander, I don't want to sit there on turn 3 and be like, I'm going to pass my turn because someone might drop a Blood Moon. And if they do, I only got 3 basics and I'm out of this game. I want to run out my Mana Rock. I want to run out my Wood Elves. I want to like draw a couple of cards. So I think that even with how you play the game, it becomes less fun for most players once you have those cards being like played in a lot of games, because those are the choices you got to make. And those choices are great when you're playing CDH. Those choices are great when you're playing Modern or Legacy, but I don't think that's what people want Commander to be about. That's not what I want Commander to be about. I want to run out my janky cards and like have things happen and not have to, leave up my mana every turn because someone might play this thing that ruins the whole game.
I mean, that's fair. For me, I just run it out anyways. I'm like, okay, whatever.
We don't play true stacks in our group, right? Like we have
Right.
like the random opposition agent, but like, no one's winter orbing on a regular basis, right? I do it like
Thankfully.
once a season maybe just to get you guys, but even then I don't think it's prudent to do it anymore. I'm like, no one has
don't
fun.
think-
It was a good
Well,
joke
yeah.
once, right? And then that was it, right? Like we don't
The Winter Orb's
regularly
funny. It is
right?
funny.
It is funny, but also we're seasoned players making content, right? Our misery is entertainment for other people, right? But what if we were just literal friends trying to have fun? Would we, would we really be staxing each other? I'm not sure, right?
I mean, the light stacks that think of like when I think of the light stack stuff, like Winter Orb, that doesn't hate anyone. That just hates everybody for no reason, right? So like when like example, like if I play an opposition agent, there's very obviously a reason why I play it, right? Or why a Notion Thief. But like Winter Orb is just like, even I have my limits, right? Because like Winter Orb is just that doesn't stop anything, right? Like that. I mean, that stops everything from ever happening. But yeah, like I don't know. I do. So what? Yeah, there's degrees of stacks that I think are definitely needed. I think they're needed, right? So like, though I think Rip, Leyline of the Void are like Stax Pieces, I think they're okay. Like, play them. I highly encourage them. I highly encourage the opposition agents. I like the Jockle Hops. Like Richard, when you Jockle Hops this and your Jund Super Friends, like great. That's great. Blow us out of the game with that, right? Like I thought that was hilarious. So I don't know.
With Planeswalker, and it was like, well,
Yeah, like, that's
your
a
win
real
condition.
win con,
Like,
right?
You
Like,
had,
yeah.
you had Planeswalkers on the battlefield, and nobody had any permanents. You win. Like,
Right.
people can scoop. Like, it's done. Like, it's over.
I'm A-okay with all of that. But the ones, really, when I think of the only cards that I dislike are Stasis, Winter Orb, and, like, Static Orb. And, like, I guess Expropriate. Otherwise, everything else, like, if you look at the salt list, whatever. Do all of that. Like, I don't really care.
Why do you dislike those over the other ones? Sorry, I was...
So, like, well, Expropriate, I just hate extra turns. And like, when I'm like, this is just a win con. Whatever, sure. You win the game. But, like, Static Orb, Winter Orb, the orbs, right? The Stasis, the orbs, those are just, like, I don't know. Those aren't flashy. Like, you didn't get us, like, you didn't, like, Perforos put in a Bearer of the Heavens, right? Like, I thought that'd even be funnier, right? Like, but, like, Stasis, Winter Orb, those cards are just, like, okay, cool. So nothing happens. That's it. Yeah, I don't know. Like, I don't think those are that great. Like, those, it doesn't hate any, it doesn't stop one specific plan, right? Like, I think Armageddon makes sense because, like, that is how I think of what I think of when, like, okay, white let's say White Weenie, they're far behind. They can't keep up with the ramp. They can't keep up with the stack interaction like Blue does, all of that. Sure. So how does, I think that a good way for White Weenie to then pull ahead is like deploy a bunch of dorks, Gaddock Teak, whatever, right? And then blow up the lands. Okay, fine, whatever. That's cool with me.
What about just like Keeper of the Court and you catch up with all the basic planes ramping because you're the grid is a
If you really
person.
think that is going to catch you up, then sure. I will tell you now that I personally do not think that catches you up at all. But yes, sure.
What do you think about the difference between Stax Pieces? Like, there's a lot of options. Like, for example, there's Crawl Space that says no more than 2 creatures can attack each combat. And then there's Ensnaring Bridge, which is essentially just no creatures can attack ever if you're playing it right. Like, is there any... I don't know. Do you see a difference between these two cards? Like, is there an acceptable kind of Stax that doesn't hate too hard and people will be okay with? Or is just anything in this realm off limits in a game of Commander?
A slight sip of Haterade and a keg stand of Haterade are almost like kind of varying degrees. But like, example, when you mention those two cards, I think they're both fine. I think like Crawl Space actually sucks, but as someone who's tried it, it sucks. And then Ensnaring Bridge, just I think artifacts in general are very easy to remove. So I think they're both bad, and like delaying combat, I don't know. I don't even think it's that bad. That's not full stacks to me. Like Peacekeeper, maybe constantly reoccurring him, like sure, whatever. Like I get that, but like I don't know. I think that it's fine. I think varying degrees of hate is fine.
I think how hard they are to remove is the most important thing, which I think Opposition Agent is a fairly fine card. It's powerful, but like any removal removes it. And like Tomer said, you're probably running 10 removal, 12 removal, 15 removal, depending on what your deck looks like. Like incidentally, like Wrath, spot removal, fighting cards, combat, you can try to ambush Opposition Agent in combat, right? Whereas if someone throws down a Crawl Space and you're a token deck or something, and, like how many artifact removal spells do you have in your deck? You have a handful, and you need to actually go grab it. So, and the harder it is to interact, like if it was someone emblem,
exists.
it'd be like the worst, Stax piece. Like imagine Winter Orb as an emblem, and you're like, great, right? Like you cannot interact with it, right? So creatures are easiest because they can be removed multiple ways, and then artifacts and enchantments. Like if you're mono black and there's an enchantment Stax piece, like, well, hope you thought seized it or something. Like you're done, right? Like you gotta.
I feel it's the other way. What? Creatures live longer now, and enchantments and artifacts are more likely to die.
Yeah,
you can protect them, but like enchantments and artifacts get removed left and right now. Like I assume, like if I keep a mana rock for a turn cycle, I've already come out way far ahead. Like just a simple mana rock because everything gets blown up now, right? So Crawl Space and things like that are so much easier to kill.
Well, that kind of segues into a question I had for the group are these Stax Pieces even good? Like, personally, a lot of these cards, unless they completely shut down my opponents from doing anything, I will almost always avoid them. Like Draenith Magistrate, we had a debate on how salty is Draenith Magistrate, and we were very much divided. Me and Krim, I believe, were on the team not salty, salty for the format. Seth and Richard said it's very salty. It goes against like the spirit of the format. If I got that correct, all right. So I personally will never run Draenith Magistrate in my decks outside of CDH. I think it's very good in CDH, and I think I've been told it's very good.
Less removal.
Well, I mean, but the idea is like if you have like a turn 1 win deck and your deck needs the commander on the valve, then now you have to find that removal spell. And like if there's a Draenith Magistrate, there's also going to be like the Sphere of Resistances and everything to slow you even further. But the idea for mid power is like if I'm in a mid power deck, the only deck that I actually would run Draenith Magistrate in these days, and I took it out of all the other decks, I put it in Belborca because I can possibility storm lock you out of the game with it. And so I find like that's a really appealing win condition in the deck. But I had it like my Selenia deck and my Brina deck, and I just took them out because what I found was, yes, it's very effective. It stops my opponents from playing their commander, and their deck is based on their commander. Whoa, that slows them down a lot. But all it does is it accrues no value for me outside of that. And then the entire table just bands together and either kills me or kills the Drannith Magistrate and then kills me because I cast the Drannith Magistrate. So I feel like the amount of hate that I got for it was not worth the amount of impact that I got at mid-power tables. And I feel like that's probably the same way for a lot of Stax cards.
Well, yeah, so like Drannith Magistrate, I think like is an okay card. I don't think it's good in like enough to just like jam in like any deck that has white mana. I found it best, like much like Tomer, I found it best in my humans deck. That's it. Like in my humans commander deck because, well, first off, it's a human and I can keep it alive. And on top of that, it delays in the game enough to where you can actually be aggressive in the format. So like, because my humans deck is just aggro. That's all it is. It's full aggro. And I mean, it has some light Stax pieces, but yeah, like, but the Stax pieces are what allows you to be aggressive early. So, like, I don't know. I mean, like a lot of Stax pieces are very narrow, right? Like, that's great. Drannith Magistrate. That doesn't stop this Wrath of God from my hand. So, like, I'm just gonna Wrath of God you. I'm like, oh, I'm kind of in trouble.
I think it depends on the Stax piece. Like, you can't really just, play through a Armageddon or a Blood Moon or things like that. There's things that just have that big impact, like, immediately. Sure, yeah. That kind of just, like, I don't know. There's not really an easy way to get out of them. So I think there are really strong Stax pieces, and I think Stax pieces are even stronger than maybe we realize because so many people shy away from playing them. Like, I think something like Stony Silence, it would be very easy to be like, I'm going to ramp without artifacts, and I'm just going to play Stony Silences, and that's going to generate a ridiculous amount of value against a random table at a commander game. Is it going to get you killed? Maybe, but if you're going to go that route, then you can, build your deck to defend yourself. So I think they're very strong, and some of their strength is unrealized just because they aren't socially acceptable in Commander. And like we've kind of just kept them, shadow banned them out of the format for the most part. But I think if you wanted them to be strong, you could make them very strong.
I think Stony Silence would be great. I mean, heck yeah.
Like, you think, so you didn't, oh, really?
Oh,
like, to
sucks.
me, that just like,
What?
It sucks. Like, it could be good, but
you don't get to
likely,
put on your shoes, right? So that means there's no nonsense there. And
it's
like
3v1 against you, right?
You.
So either it doesn't affect anyone or only affects one person, in which you went down a card to anger one person without, going further in your game plan, right? Or it angers everyone and 3v1, you're going to die. So in 1v1, Stax works because you're staxing the only person that can hit you and you have an advantage on them, right? And you're going to win because you have the advantage on them and they're staxed out. 3v1, it's 3 times the mana, 3 times the card, 3 times the combats. So if you stacks the table, you need to stack them good. Like, they need to be out of the game, period. Otherwise, they have more resources, they'll kill you, right?
But I don't.
So you got to finish the stacks that you started. You can't slap down Nathalia and call it a day. People will get mad and remove it, right? You need to, like, Rule of Law, Triple Thalia, Trinisphere, and then, finish the game, right? Like, you can't do a half
exactly
stacks.
that, though. I just Thalia because she's a human, right? And it's great. It delays it.
Don't you just get killed first?
People get upset, right?
Well, actually, who cares to all of... No, like legitimately... I don't mind if I lose, right? Like it's fun, right? Like I sat down to play a game and I did, right? Like I executed my game plan, right? And I guess I'm fine with that. So like,
you have a really good mentality.
We're asking if it was good.
Yeah.
I
was saying like power level wise. Do you think if there's no controversy around running these Stax pieces, do you think adding these Stax pieces would increase your win percentage dramatically, or like which ones would and which ones wouldn't? That's what I'm trying to get at.
I think like adding like a Thalia and an opposition Ocean Thieves, those do add to your win percentages. They add to your win percentage, but also anything that adds anything to your win percentage also adds into the aggro column, right? So like that's why I think I'm okay with it. It's like, okay, sure, I'm moving, I guess, some win percentages, but it also adds the aggro column. So it's more, I'm not upset about it. Like if people are like, oh, let's kill Krim, right? Like he played Thalia, get him. Okay, I deserve it. I have Thalia.
I'm kind of like Richard said, it depends on if you're willing to build around them. Like if stacks were acceptable, I think we'd see a lot more actual stacks decks, and I think those would be really, really powerful. Would just jamming a random stacks piece into a generic deck greatly improve your win percentage? I think maybe some of them. I think especially like mass land destruction effects, like could definitely greatly improve your win percentage. They're not sitting out on the battlefield. People aren't necessarily going to see them coming. And then all of a sudden you just wait till the opportune moment, and it should increase your win percentage, I would think. So I think it really depends on the stacks piece and the deck that you're playing and how far you're willing to go as far as trying to stacks out the table.
To answer the question, though, I do think stacks is good.
A stacks deck or stacks pieces?
Stacks pieces and whatnot. A stacks deck, I've actually played through a stacks deck against it, and like it's oddly enough, it slows the game down, and then essentially you just wait, and then you like don't tap out, you don't do anything unless you absolutely have to, like they blow up the lands, and then you just blow up all their stuff, and then you play the game. They lose the game after you blow up the stuff. They legitimately lose the game after you blow up their stuff, though.
I mean, I think the only good stacks pieces are ones that further your game plan. So that'd be Notion Thief, Opposition Agent. They're giving you something, right? You're not just agitating the table, you're getting resources. Whereas if I just threw down a Stony Silence for value, like that's like a death mark, right? That's you just pissed everyone off and you've accomplished nothing, right? So, and they're not that crippled, right? Like they still have mana, they still have creatures, they can still beat you down. So that I think the best thing was Tomer with his Karn Lattice Lock. He was like, you guys have creatures. I can Karn Lattice Lock everyone, but then you'll just all attack me and like kill me. So I can't do the Lattice Lock because it's not finishing the job, right? You really need to Wrath, then Karn Lattice Lock, and then you're good, right? Otherwise, you just annoy everyone and you die.
I also agree with Richard on the ones that like get either immediate value. Like I think Opposition Age is one of the better ones where like you flash it in, so you immediately deny somebody like a card, you know, like they're either going to be cracking a land and you just got them down land, they wasted a Vampiric Tutor, and then you get that value yourself too, and that's really big. And then yeah, sure, you're going to get aggro, but I think it was worth it. Or you put such a strong stacks piece that they just can't, they can't retaliate. Like you Planeswalker and then Joko hops them. It's like, well, all right, you're upset. What are you going to do about it? Oh, nothing. I'm going to tick up Ultimate and win. One of my favorite, this is a little shout out to a little card that I think is overlooked, but I love it from Budget Brews, Sharn Implacable Earth. This is one of my favorite stacks pieces. It enters battlefield, you get to switch your library for a basic forest and basic plains, and you put it into your hand, so you get a little bit of card advantage. And then players can't pay life or sacrifice non-land permanents to cast spells or activate abilities. It really messes with black decks that focus on sacrificing and paying life, but also anybody who's running like the fetch lands that have to require you to pay one life. It actually shuts all that stuff down too. I've loved it, and it's also a big 4/4 beefy boar. So you get some value out of it immediately. It shuts down a lot of stuff, and you have a good boar on the battlefield. I've always had a really good experience with this, and I would consider this a stacks piece because it does stop your opponents, from cracking fetches and doing regular things in Magic. But I found that the response to this card isn't like super negative, and even if it gets removed or whatever, you still got 2 lands out of it. So, hooray for your Sharn Implacable Earth! Just shout out.
Yeah, that card is sweet. I had that as my commander for I think one season, and it was really fun.
Of course, you had that for a commander.
also shuts down treasures. Worth mentioning with Dockside being everywhere.
Yeah, this card.
Why are you guys cool with this? I don't get it. But why can't shut down your lands with like a balance or an Armageddon or something? But I can shut down all your treasures and it's cool. Like I don't get it. Like what's the difference?
I agree that you can shut down my lands.
Having them cry.
You can shut down my lands.
While I don't like the you should just play more removal argument, I am pretty accepting of stacks pieces on creatures, because honestly, someone should be able to kill a creature. Like really in this case, like between all the wrath and removal, they aren't likely to stick around for very long. So I think that's why Sharn doesn't bother me as much as some of the other pieces. And it's kind of like that with other creature-based Stax pieces as well. I think of creature-based Stax pieces as like the lightest form of Stax, and someone's going to be able to remove them eventually, right?
All right, okay,
Unless
I
they
got a
have
card
flash.
for you.
Because like, okay, go ahead.
Wizards RD coming through here.
no.
6 mana 4/4. When it enters the battlefield, phase out all lands until it leaves the battlefield. This
No,
fine?
we had that. We
that
have Realm
exists. We have
Raiser.
Realm Raiser. Yeah,
Yeah.
that actually
how
is a
much,
card.
how much
No
is
one
Realm
plays
Raiser
it.
to cost?
6.
Or is it actually
Probably
6?
It's Naya. It's Naya mana,
I
but
think
it is
you
6.
literally
Yeah.
just came up with a magic
I think you just
card.
designed a.
Is this
a
cool?
Here's the
Six
alert
mana.
card.
It's a
You
6
want
mana
people to play
4/2. It's a 6 mana 4/2, and that's
Would you be
battlefield
super
exile
salty if I
lands.
played this thing?
When it leaves
That
the battlefield, return all exiled cards to the battlefield untapped under the Oath's control. You built a magic card, Richard. Congratulations.
did.
That's an extreme example though, because you're taking away the resources necessary to deal with it. So in that case, I would probably still be a little bit salty. But like,
I don't know.
you
Realm
Sharn?
Raiser's pretty
Back in the
funny.
day.
Can I
Realm
play
Raiser's
this like
pretty
Clash? What do we conclude?
It's also really good in landfall decks if you blink it, because then they all enter the battlefield again and you get all those
Yeah.
landfall triggers.
Yeah.
It's really fun. It's a fun card, Richard.
You could actually play that as a tech to save yourself against an Armageddon, and you can flash it in.
I would
Oh
be
my
way
God.
more okay with that than Armageddon, honestly.
This
like
is a cool card.
I would be way more accepting of getting got by Realm Raiser.
I think
One,
it's
just
just
like the
because,
first
again,
time, and then afterwards you're like, get out of here, right?
the
Like
problem
it's
is
funny
when
to
it
see
has
this
flash.
card, but then that's only once.
It's because
do it too many
like
times,
I,
but-
I think that Armageddon just like not every color interacts on the stack like blue does, right? So like Realm Raiser, every color does interact with a creature. Doesn't interact, but not everything interacts on the stack. So I could see why you wouldn't be excited to see Armageddon, but you're okay with Realm Raiser.
I think also Notion Thief is a little bit more salty because it's flashed. So like, you know, you cast a spell, you try to draw a bunch of cards, and then somebody flashes a Notion Thief. It's like, yes, it is a creature. You can kill it, but guess what? I already got my value out of it. GG scrub.
Yeah.
Well, that's why you just play MDFCs and have Spikefield Hazard ready at all times.
Like Field Hazard.
But really, do you want to? Do you want to have to think that way in Commander? Do you want to have to think, okay, do I need to leave up 2 mana so I have a counter in case I don't know. I don't
just
know if you
see
want
what's
to have
wrong
to
with having
consider
that thought in the back of your mind, though. Like to have that thought in the back of your mind, I think is fine, and you should have that, right? Because like I don't know. Again, right? Like this is the way we prefer to play the game, but like I think on average, I would rather just not have to worry about like my opponents worrying about what I'm okay with or whatever. Like I want to know power levels, and that's about it, right? Like as I've mentioned before, are you a starter deck? Are you CDH? That's my power gauge, right? Anything in between, let's play.
I agree with Krim. Like he can throw basically anything at me, and I have the right mentality for it. But I know a lot of people don't. And also there's another.
But is that not
thing outside
furthered
of,
by us, like and like content creators, like constantly talking about like, oh, it's totally not cool to like do that, right? Like there are people that say that, and then people adopt that philosophy, right?
Have you played with humans, Krim? Like, can you really sit down with a table of strangers and be like, yo, Thalia into Thalia to Trinisphere, and watch everyone sitting there like, you know, maybe they're nice, right? They won't cuss you out or flip the table, but you can see they're not having a good time, right? And you're like, welcome to game night, guys. Like,
Well, honestly, I've gotten thrashed. Like I think at Vegas, like I think I got thrashed like legitimately, and I was like, word, that's cool. Like somebody sat down with a Sylvala deck. I'm like, well, it's not CDH, and then they just kind of went off, right? I'm like, well, all right.
I think it's also there's one criteria that I don't think is discussed enough other than power level, and that's game length. This is something that I've actually, as someone who's doing recordings, like I do Commander Quickies, or I used to do Commander Quickies. One thing that has really rustled my jimmies, especially because I'm an old man now, is that sometimes I just don't feel like locking into a 3-hour game. Like I think it was like bringing it back to like competitive or like League of Legends, even an analog for League of Legends. Like if you're sitting down for a League of Legends game, like sure you're good for any sort of playstyle in theory, but what if I told you instead of I don't know how long League of Legends is, but let's say League of Legends takes an hour. What if the meta shifted and the meta now is 3-hour games, 3-hour Turtle Fest, and that was it? Well, you'd be like, well, I don't want to play this anymore. Yes, I'm in for play to win, play to like crush my enemies and everything, but I have an hour and I get grouchy and hungry after an hour and a half. And after 2 hours, I'm not having a fun time anymore. It doesn't even matter what the board sit is. I'm just not having fun. So like Stax decks might have that issue too. If you go too hard on stacks, you slow the game down too much, then you're basically increasing the likelihood of a 3-hour game. And people might not like that for that reason, as opposed to just like other reasons. Like me, I don't like 3-hour games anymore. I'm tired.
As somebody who sat down and played the game that killed Magic, Artifact, like as someone who did that, I could tell you one thing. That's sarcasm for those that don't know. Artifact did not do that. And Artifact games were very, very long. They were actually about like 2.5 to 3 hours sometimes.
Wow. Who likes that, right? All games optimize. Like League of Legends actively optimizes to shorten game length, right? And not too short, right? So maybe Standard has the opposite issue where games are too short, where you snowball out of control, but you also don't want them to drag on with very little progress. They add incentives for people to progress the game and to close out the game, and they have an optimal time they want people to play for. And I think Tomer's right. Like an hour or something is about right. You don't want to be like, it's 4 p.m. This Commander game might take 1 to 6 hours. I can't eat dinner, right? Yeah. You want to be like, I will be in and out in an hour so we can play and then we can go eat and we can all have a jolly good time, right? So maybe Stax is like the Shahrazad problem, right? It's not that good, but who wants to sit through this?
I'm okay with, like, that makes sense to me. That's the only thing that makes sense to me so far. Like when people like complain about stacks, right? It's like, okay, well, I get that. You don't want to play a slow game. I'm not going to just randomly be like, hey, like, I think of it a lot like, hey, friends are here. Do we want to play Monopoly or Risk? No, because we got to go somewhere in about 2 hours, right?
It's Twilight Imperium time, boys.
Yes. All right. Well, cool. We got a movie in 30 minutes. Let's crack open Twilight Imperium and get started. No. Like, I get that. Time expectation of your time and whatnot, that's fine. Like, if you don't want to play a long game, that's cool. Then I'm going to play a faster deck because of that reason. If it were a power level thing, if it were like a stacks thing, like, do I have a problem with stacks? No, not at all. Do I have a problem with the power level of it? No, not at all. The problem I would have with it is if I have something to do in like 3 hours.
Something to do, like play Magic.
I gotta go play more Magic in about 3. Okay, and it has to be a legit thing, right? If you're telling me like I gotta leave, wife's picking me up or whatever, I gotta pick up the kids in 2 hours. Sure, all right. Let's not chance it, because I know my stacks games are gonna go longer, right? So I'm gonna play a faster deck. That makes sense.
Although I will say, as we have learned on Commander Clash, not that easy to control game length. Sometimes
without
games just
stacks,
no matter what you're doing, with stacks, without stacks, like games can just go long or short. So I don't know, can you even optimize for that? And maybe this is way too far off topic, but can you even have that conversation? Because can you predict how long a game's going to go when you're sitting down at a table with people?
No, but you definitely don't help it by playing stacks. Yeah.
I would agree with that. Playing stacks,
right? Like,
it's stacks. It's if I'm playing control, but there's another one that like I don't allow it on quickies anymore. But another really popular archetype is the Blink archetype, like Urian, Brago, like those things. Urian, whatever. I don't know. I don't play standard.
Have you been talking to Seth?
Whatever Seth.
Have you been talking to Seth?
I picked it up from a Seth video. Urian, Blink, what's the other one? The Zorius God Farah. There was so I had a Urian
it's EP Hara. It's EP Hara. Like,
it's a Pokemon. I don't get it.
Yeah.
So I had a quickie with a Urian Blink, and it lasted, guess what? 3 hours. And then I had a Farah game. Again, guess what? 3 hours, and it was literally just like trying to shut down the blinking but the blink is very recursive, and all it does is accrues incremental value very slowly. It doesn't kill you quickly. It's going to kill you with 2/2s eventually. But it just keeps doing the thing. You know, it keeps doing the loop. It keeps recurring this thing you blew up in the graveyard by blinking, blah, 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 blah. And it does it over and over again. And you can remove it. You can remove little pieces, and you will. But like, it's just that's what the engine does. So like, there are certain archetypes that you kind of like, after you play against it a couple times, you kind of realize, yeah, we're in for a long game if these are the type of decks that we're going to be into. And I think I would lump that in with like, I think that's an important criteria to discuss. Like, how long do you want this game to go? And that's irrespective of power level. You can play a bad blink deck and it will still be longer. You can play a bad control deck and it will still be longer, or bad stacks. And that's not a power level thing. It's just how much time do you have right now? How much time do you want this game to go on for?
I have a question, which I know the answer to.
Okay.
So, what about optional stacks? We're like, oh, stacks is so egregious. Well, what if you get stacked unless XYZ happens? Rhystic Study, Esper Sentinel. You are taxed unless you let that player draw a card. And the answer is that the tax is so like soul crushing that you would rather throw the game and give the person like all the cards rather than pay any amount of tax, right? Like, isn't this proof that everyone hates tax, that they will throw the game? They will let someone cast a 3 mana draw 30 because they do not want to be taxed a single mana a single turn. They will just throw the game away. That's how egregious taxing is. No?
Seth, can you answer this?
Why are you all looking at me?
Seth, can you answer this, please? I'm going to just go out right and ask you.
I feel a little bit
What's your
attacked.
opinion on this? I prefer nothing.
Seth.
I think those cards are fine, and I just cast my spells into them, and then the other person wins. We've seen this many times on Commander Clash. We're gonna mill them out. That's my answer.
By the way,
sticking to it.
we should fill you in, Seth, that the other day we played fair Magic mostly, and Phil did not get a single card for the longest. He drew.
See, that's what happens when I miss a week of Commander Clash. People actually pay the one, and things go much differently.
Richard let him draw a couple.
Richard
cards.
eventually did, but it was like,
Phil
think about
still
it.
came out positive, but we paid for
Turn 8, Phil drew 2 cards. 2 cards.
I put myself back 2 turns. I put myself back on turn 2, a full turn cycle, and then I put myself back another full turn cycle later on.
I delayed my commander by 2 turns.
And you felt terrible and complained about it because you were getting stacks out of the game, right? Like, it was not a feel good. You were doing it to send a message, right?
Honestly, it was one of my favorite games. I felt like I was in the right mindset because it wasn't even Phil. I don't want to go too derailed, but I felt I was being stacked more by the Thrax player because my deck was a Voltron deck, and it had it had hexproof on it, and it didn't really have a lot of like ulterior creatures to protect itself. So I had hexproof, and I had a big Voltron win condition. And Thraximander, guess what? Every single time he attacks, he makes you sacrifice a creature. So Thraximander just being on the table, anytime you cast him, haste, immediately sacrifice your commander. Don't pass go. Don't collect $20 or whatever.
Just don't get too hasty. That's all.
And also, he had a Shadow Spear on the battlefield, which removed the hexproof and indestructible for my Voltron commander. So I had to play around that mentality where I had a commander that's all about loading up with indestructible. It has hexproof innately. And it's all about killing you with your commander. And I was up against a player who said, I can make you sacrifice your commander at any given time. I can remove your hexproof. I can remove your indestructible if you have it. Have fun. And I was in the mentality of like, this is a puzzle where like I don't think I was getting salty in that game. I don't think so.
No, you solved the puzzle. It was sweet.
I didn't feel salty. And like I was just like, all right, I'm gonna bide my time. I'm gonna wait until I have the right opportunity that I can one shot because I know my commander can one shot. So all I need to do is find my haste enabler, find enough critical mass, find that evasion, and eventually I will win the game off that. And I was playing to my outs the entire time, and I felt really good. Like I felt like I played pretty well, and I felt really satisfied. But like a lot of people, I know I've been in a bad headspace sometimes where I was in a situation where like I was like I don't get to play Magic. I'm not having fun, and I didn't enjoy it at all. And I think that's valid too. But like it depends on your headspace. I don't know where I was going with that. Where were we talking about again?
So you pro stacks now? I'm confused because I know if you died without doing anything, if someone decided to swing at you, you would not be happy about that game. I know
wouldn't
what happened
be-
was you managed to play around it and you managed to clutch it out and it like worked out well. But
And it was
there
very
was a real
satisfying.
possibility that everyone just swung into
I did
you and
misclick.
you spent the first 4 turns doing nothing and die.
Well,
and
like,
I think
I've also got some wins in the season as well, so like I didn't feel like, like I'm locked out of this game, I'm locked out of every game. There was one season where I felt like I was just locked out of every game, and I was just it was lame. It felt I was a grouch the entire season. I think, and
that's
this
what happens
season
if you get
though,
staxed out, right? Like I'm not saying it's not justified,
but
right?
if it
It's
happens
just
every single game, yeah, it feels bad. But if it happens once in a while, like I don't care because like I don't feel like I need to pop off every game.
the only solution to that is no stacks, right?
Uh,
Because maybe
no
this
stacks
time
every
you
single-
maybe this time you maneuvered around it and it felt good. But what about the other 9 out of 10 where you don't maneuver around it and you're just
Well, what about
left
stacks
doing
every once
nothing?
in a while? Like you can have like instead of every game, it's not either all or nothing. Maybe you can have some stacks games like 1 every 4 games has a stacks player in it. And
What if today I bring the stacks deck and then tomorrow it's Seth's turn to bring the stacks deck and then the third
there's
day
always-
it's Chris
Yeah,
and now
always
it's
one.
just constantly here, right?
Sure, but I don't know.
I mean,
I don't. Some amounts.
is that a
To wrap around to Richard's original question about paying for stacks, it really depends on the
I hate
cost,
it.
right? Like there's some of those effects are essentially like
Single
hard
mana set
stacks, and
of one
well, like
mana.
like I don't view is Esper Sentinel even a stacks piece? Like Esper for me, Esper Sentinel is perfectly fine. But then there's cards that are like Smothering Tide. We've seen paying 2 is a lot harder than paying 1. And then there's extreme ones like Hum of the Radiex, this weird old Mirrodin card. It's a 4 mana green enchantment that says each artifact spell costs 1 more to play for each artifact its controller controls. So essentially, if you have a few artifacts, like you got to pay the 5, you got to pay the 6 to cast each spell. So I think it really just depends on what the rate is on those cards.
You don't
I
consider
feel like you're
stacks
saying my
because
Esper
you
Sentinel
don't pay
stacks.
and you throw the game as a result, right? Like you know what like if you were forced to pay, like if Esper Sentinel was like a forced pay or Ristic Study was a forced pay, you would consider it a stacks piece. But what you're doing is you're like, this isn't a stacks piece, and you're just letting the other person get the greatest magic card in existence,
Win the
right?
game.
Draw 10 for 3 mana, right?
Was this podcast actually like an intervention to try to get me to pay the 1? Is this what this is
It's just
actually going
optional
on?
stacks doesn't work. That's how
We're
bad
all
it
your
is. We would
friends
throw
here,
the game.
Seth. We're all concerned citizens, all right? We just want to help.
This is where I stomp off and and leave. Yeah, feel attacked.
I think
feel
all
it,
of that's
yeah.
fine. I don't even think that like Esper Sentinel, like optional stacks, those cards, those are great. Those are fine.
I hate them. They're so insidious to me because I feel like they prolong the game way more than they should because every single time you're casting a spell into it, you have to think about, all right, do I have the mana to pay for this? What is the rest of the sequencing of this turn going to be like? What are my opponents going to be doing? Are my opponents going to ignore it? Because if my opponents are ignoring it, then I'm going to be the only one left behind. And then it adds all of this extra layers of complexity to the game when it should just be like Esper Sentinel should just say, pay 1 mana, draw 3 cards. You know, just say that. Just say that. It's more honest. And we can just continue with the game and we don't have to waste all this time about it. And Ristic Study, just say I win the game. Just say I win the game.
That's
And
not
then we
how that
can
card
shuffle
works.
up and play.
That's not how that card works.
All right,
dude.
it says like draw 10. Statistically, like on our average, it says draw 10. and
On
make
our
your opponents-
average, that's because Seth right there. Seth is
It
our
also-
average.
It never just says draw cards. It also says and your opponents have to pay X mana and they're behind X amount of turns. Like
But if the
there's
table
more to this card.
agrees, like when we did for the most part of like the last clash, when the table agrees, look at that. It was harmony. It was beautiful. Phil drew nothing.
But
That's
we
the
were all
exception.
behind. I was behind the game because I did that. You know, like it's not like
But,
it's not
but
nothing.
a deck that's playing that, okay, if I saw Esper Sentinel in a humans deck, I'd probably be a little more worried. But if I see Esper Sentinel in like an Ristic Study in like a Dirtily deck, that means we have time.
Yeah. I'd rather just lose to Ristic Study. I don't even want to deal with it. I'd rather just scoop. You
I mean,
win.
the easy-
you press the 3 button.
The easy way around your time problem is you just decide before the game you're not paying for any of the ones on any
So
cards
did you just-
that say, and then you don't got to think about it at all.
But
you
I
just
want
said
to win.
you wanted Commander to be co-op, right? Here's co-op.
yeah.
We all pay the 1.
Or no,
I
I'm
wanna
the co-op
win.
player because I'm handing out cards to other players
Oh
at the
my
table. I'm collaborating by giving them cards.
All right. What about a harsher stack? So this one, your opponent draws the 1. What if you don't pay the 1, you discard? Or if you don't pay the 1, you take 5
pay
damage.
the 1 every time. Except pay the 1
I might
every time.
pay the 1. I might pay the
Would
1
you
on
count
that.
this as a Stax piece or not? Is it okay? Should we be making
You're
these
technically
cards?
not locked out. You could do whatever.
Like, don't we have an Elder Dragon? Like, if you cast a card from your graveyard or something, you take 10, or if you search your
there's-
library,
yeah,
you take
Omnixilus?
10.
Yeah,
like those
Omnixilus,
kind of
if you-
cards.
yeah.
But
There's
you
also
know,
Painful Quandary. If you cast a spell, you have to lose 5 life or discard a card.
Painful
yeah.
Quandary is
Are
a great
those
magic
cool?
card.
You can
Yeah.
cut through the tax if you really wanted, but the cost is very steep and obvious to you, right?
It gets you killed really fast.
What kills you faster,
mean-
the Painful Quandary or Seth just still popping off?
We're gonna mill him out, Krim. We're gonna mill him out.
We're gonna mill out the Quandary.
I've never really thought of him as Stax Pieces before, honestly.
That's why you play them wrong all the time.
I think of him
draw.
I don't think of him as taxes. It's just draw a card when someone casts a spell. So honestly, my mind is blown. I've never even realized that people think of them in this way, that it's an actual legitimate option that you could pay for them, like a Thalia or something. So I'm very confused at the moment. I've learned so much today. I think Painful Quandary and stuff like that's fine. Like, I don't know. Are those even Stax Pieces?
I don't think
That is
so.
totally a Stax piece, no?
I think they're
it's
Stax
either going
light.
to kill you or make you lose your entire hand eventually. I don't know.
It's a win con. That's not a Stax piece, dude.
It disrupts you, but continues to disrupt you for the rest of the game until it's removed, right? It's not like
Maybe.
a one-time
Or you
thing,
just
right?
pay the 5 life.
So how can you make Esper Sentinel in a way that wasn't worded that way? Because I do think there's some legitimacy to the idea of, like, it takes too long. Like, people got to think about it. It takes too long. Like, how do you make cards like that without
ETB, draw
having
3
them
cards,
optional?
call it a day.
No,
Or-
cast trigger, draw 3 cards, and then we'll move on with our life. Ristic Study, on average, is cast trigger, draw 10. So just say that. Just say the Ristic Study, when you cast this from your hand, draw 10 cards. And then the game can continue. It's like, I don't know.
Oh man, I don't know. Is Ristic Study that good? I feel like it always never draws me a card, dude. No one pays. Everyone pays.
Then it's a one-sided Sphere of Resistance, which is also very good. Imagine Sphere of Resistance just said 3 mana. It spells your opponent's control cost 1 more. But yours are fine. You just keep trucking along. You keep doing your thing. But everybody else has to pay 1 extra for every single spell they cast.
Good.
That's still a good card, I think.
Good. Yeah, good. I mean, I
You'll
still
get
play it.
killed. But
Everything I play gets me killed.
I know. I just hate those. I can't even have a reasonable debate about these cards because I hate them so much. Well, Esper's fine-ish. The Ristic Study, I can't even have a logical debate. I just like
They're
froth
both
at the
fine.
mouth.
They're both
I just froth
fine.
at the mouth. I hate it so much.
They're both fine.
Oof. All right. Well, okay, here's a question for you all. We talked about stacks, what we like and we don't like, and which ones we would play. What type of stacks cards would we like to see in the future, if any? Is there any like sort of design space that we would like to see some stacks cards? Like, do they like serving a purpose that maybe you want to see fulfilled in Commander? And if so, how?
More of them attached to creatures and or planeswalkers. Because planeswalkers, yes, the planeswalker guy would say that, but planeswalkers are kind of easy to interact with, right? You can attack them. Creatures, you can kind of just remove them. Simple as that. Don't ever attach them to something like a land or something like that, please God. Like Glacial
Indestructible,
Chasm,
hexproof.
I think
Strip
Glacial
Mine.
Chasm or whatever is like a little problematic, but yeah.
Return in the Strip Mine.
I wouldn't mind some more narrow, like, targeted hate cards. Like, I do think there are problems that could be solved. I know one card that sticks out to me is, like, Confounding Conundrum, which is designed to hate on people having multiple lands enter the battlefield in the same turn. I don't think
It
that
ends
was
up
quite...
helping them.
Yeah, it wasn't tuned exactly in a way to work, but I wouldn't mind to see more Stax cards that narrowly hate on specific things. Not things that are going to take people all the way out of the game, but we know that, like, Green Ramp is really powerful in Commander, and it pushes a lot of people into playing green. So cards that somehow like slow down that archetype or that play pattern in specific, I think that could be beneficial. But I also don't want to see like Armageddon. I don't think Armageddon's the solution. Just being like, hey, no one gets to play Magic. Like that's not how you solve that problem. But I feel like there's got to be something in between Armageddon and Confounding Conundrum to like make green a little bit more fair compared to the rest of the tables with ramping.
Just Confounding Conundrum
R&D
with like legitimately, instead of only bouncing a land back, you bounce like 4.
What about this? My R&D hat is going on. This would be a creature, and it would say, if a land enters the battlefield, if it's the second land to enter the battlefield this turn on the controller's side, it instead enters the battlefield on your control.
Ooh.
So you can play a land each turn, but if you want to play a second land on the same turn, aka like a rampant growth effect, then it will go over on your side. So you could still play around it. You still play your land each turn, or you can rampant growth, but you cannot do both at the same time, or else I'm going to get that land instead. And it's on a creature. It doesn't have protection or anything.
Would it have
I think
flash?
it's great. Yes.
No. Well, maybe.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, it would.
Whatever
And
whatever is
3/2.
not salty.
And it
Something
could be called
like that would be fine.
Proposition Agent. Oh my God. There it is, dude. There it is.
Being green.
No. It'd be
This
come on,
card would be
don't-
so bad for the format.
Do you
It
think
would be great for the format. Are you
Because
kidding me?
okay, so I understand the point about narrow answer. You don't want to like grind the game to a halt, but when you put narrow cards in, you king make. Right? Say there are 2 green players at the table and then a Dimir player. Dimir player's popping off with like mana crypts and signets, and then you slap down this anti-ramp card and the green players twiddle their thumbs and Dimir players slingshotting ahead of everyone. So
Yeah, but
like narrow
artifacts already
answers
have
king make,
answers.
right?
Then
So-
don't ramp. Just
But there's
play
also
one
Vandal
land.
Blast and stuff like the mirror player. If somebody has a lot of artifacts, like it's already so acceptable and even expected that you're going to wipe out all their mana rocks at some point. So you're going to shove them super far behind if you can resolve a Vandal Blast or a Bane of Progress. But we don't have that for like lands. Like there's
The
no
answer is to
equivalent.
ban 4 mana ramp spells all across the board, right? Like you're right? There is an unfair advantage for green ramping today, but you know, you could Blood Moon, and then the mono white player is laughing his way to the bank, and the 5C players are out of the game, right? Like you king make and make it. You know, what's that ban card where 2 players play the game and no one else plays? Like
Trade secrets.
yeah, you do something
is
like this.
Seth and Ristic study.
When you have like a quote unquote narrow, but the narrow is like all lands, right? At least with graveyard, it's narrow, but not everyone's a graveyard deck. But everyone needs to cast spells and ramp and have lands, right? So I don't know. I think it'd be more king makey.
Is
But
there a
allowed
way you
to
could
ramp,
do
they're
it
just not allowed
right?
to play a land and ramp.
Like maybe if that design isn't right, is there any way, like, is there something that could slow down something like that, like green ramp or other some narrow slice if something gets too powerful? Because we do that in constructed formats. Like if some mechanic or playstyle gets too good, then Wizards can print a hate card to like slow it down, or it just won't that work in Commander because of how the format is.
It has to be like a Fires of Invention, like an Invala? Not Invala. What's the Azorius hate card where if you cast a spell, you must have that number of lands. Otherwise,
Lavinia?
Lavinia. Yeah, Lavinia.
So something like amount of mana per turn. If it's like turn 4, the maximum mana spell you can cost is 4. So
But
that
you
if
also
you
have to get some
ramped
value
or
out of it, or
mana
else
rocked
people-
your way in, you would be equally locked out.
But you also have to
Okay.
get some extra value out of it, or else you wouldn't want to play it. Like Thalia is legal, but people don't play Thalia. Like,
I mean, throw ETB draw a card on it or something, and it'll be fine. Like
mass
it's
solution.
easy enough. Yeah.
I liked Homer's card, so I thought that was great.
Of course you would
I'd play
you would
5
take
of those.
Destroy All Forests
can't
on a
believe-
I would.
Atlanta Warehouse or something.
I
yes.
would. I would, yes. There's got to be something that combats boil, right? And choke, so why not?
It's the problem with playing choke. Like this, like it's why Carpet of Flowers is somehow acceptable, but choke is not. right?
Yeah.
Like
Carpet
it's
of
the same
Flowers
thing,
is
right? You
also
are like
crack.
metagaming against the deck, and you get some like crazy advantage, but somehow Carpet is fine, but Choke is
fine.
like you're a big meaty face, right? Like
Yeah.
I think
'Cause
both
you're,
are a
you're putting me
problem.
behind instead of putting yourself ahead.
yeah.
That's like the mentality is like,
It really
I guess.
is, yeah. It's a psychology thing that we talked about in the beginning. Like, it just, you still feel like you're doing your thing, even though someone else is doing their thing way, way better. And you're kind of like, oh, I wish I was them. Like, maybe next game I will be them.
I
But when
was
you're
them.
the person who doesn't get to untap your lands, you don't
that could be
you don't
me.
get that feeling.
Well, I guess that's why like White moved away from Balance and Armageddon. They moved to catch-up ramp, which
Yeah.
I think it does have value, but they have to push it a little bit more. Like I really like Archaeomancer's map, for example. I like the idea of Archaeomancer's map. I like the idea of like, okay, if you're behind on lands, you get this really powerful effect. If you're not behind on lands, though, you still get something. Archaeomancer's map puts 2 planes into your hand, so you get something at the very least. And if you're behind, boom, you get to ramp super hard. And I like that.
Card's so
and-
bad late.
It doesn't
More of the
suck,
green
so.
problem. I think they just ban. I think so.
Just
People
ban green.
always say there's 2 things that people bring as the answer for Stax, right? Like why Stax is good because you stop combos, and this is usually in the context of fair players, right? Like they probably don't have counter spells, and they're like, "What do I do? I'm not playing blue. How do I stop your combo?" So the answer is Stax, and then ramp. Right here you are ramping away. You have like 30 mana on turn 5. I have like 4 mana because I played a land each turn. How do I stop you? And I think it's very hard to stop. I think you just gotta ban out the ramp, right? Like stop making more ramp. So adding white ramp doesn't help because now green and white are overpowered. Everyone else is falling behind, and you need to
then
add the Stax piece.
But they won't ban
I knew I
the
liked
green ramp because
Richard.
people
Richard
like
gets
green
it.
ramp. Like that's the thing. People get excited
So
about green
don't
ramp.
keep printing new ramp. That's like step 1.
They
Right?
need to sell
Don't-
packs, Richard.
There's so
Kodama
much
the
ramp,
East
does it-
tree. Come on.
Does it even matter at this point? Like, we have such a critical mass of ramp. Like, even if
ban
they
it
never
all.
put another ramp spell, would it
Would
would it matter?
rampant growth.
Ban it all.
Like you
It's-
can
it's
ramp
rampant
one,
growth, but it
you can
costs
ramp
one mana.
one land. You can keep rampant growth, but none of this like 5 mana ramp 5 or 4 mana ramp 2. Like none of this super advantageous thing, right?
I mean,
Or you just print Tomer's card and you keep it in circulation. You make more of them.
I actually like my design. I'm gonna.
I also
submit it
like
to
your design.
Mark Rosewater himself.
I love that card. Please make that happen. Commander Legends 420. I don't know, whichever one. Just get it in there.
I think philosophically, though, I like people catching up more than I like stopping people in Commander, if that makes sense. Like, if there was a way to have people also ramp so they could keep pace with the green deck, maybe that would be more fun overall for people playing Commander than being like, oh, we're going to hate on that and make you do less of what you want to do.
Because you abuse it. I play white all the time, and I have the most lands on the battlefield with all my catch-up ramp. Because I abuse the heck out of it, such that it is not catch-up anymore, right? Like, there are ways to maneuver around them. Like, if it was, like, truly catch-up, maybe. But Magic players are crafty. They can cheat their symmetrical effects into non-symmetrical effects. They can cheat their catch-up into, catapult ahead, right?
Into
like,
mustard.
Winter Orb is symmetrical. They're great? No, right? Because you find a way around it, and it's no longer symmetrical, and you destroy the table, right?
So do we just not want any more Stax Pieces then? Is that the
No,
the
we want
TLDR?
more. We want more.
Well, accepting Crim. We know you want more Crim.
More.
I like my idea. I don't know. I
So
like Stax, but it has to be.
yeah, someone has to speak up other than me. But what do you think?
Tober hates Narset. He hates Notion Thief. He hates.
Yeah, but I also
Crim.
discovered the other
Agent,
day.
But you're suddenly pro
I'm telling you,
tax?
Tomer
I can't
Tomer
believe
just
it.
the other day when we did the troll episode, he's like half a day away, a bad day away from being a chaos player, right?
You might want to check out the viewer submitted week, Crim. That's all I'm gonna say.
Great.
I might have called out your name to witness me for a moment. I fulfilled your legacy. I think some Stacks is kind of okay, but like it really depends on how the general public is going to receive it. I don't think any amount of podcasts or content creators or anything is going to convince people being like, actually, these effects that you don't like are fun. I don't like. You can have any sort of rational debate. You can math it out. If there was a statistical way you can show that these effects are actually good and healthy for the format, yada yada yada. You can give the best reasoning ever. If people don't like something, they don't like something, and it's just a feels based thing. So like, I would say print Stax E effects that people mostly enjoy or at least tolerate. And don't print Staxy effects that people actively dislike. Like, I think that's basically all you can hope for. I like Stax. I do. I like Stax effects. I like the puzzle aspect, as Grim says, especially if I'm in the right mentality for it. But at the end of the day, this is a game for people to have fun. And if people don't have fun with these effects, I won't play them against them, and hopefully there are Stax effects that Wizards can come up with that will, address the disparity between land ramp and artifact ramp and stuff like that in a way that people aren't that upset about. And I think there is a way to do it, and I hope they keep trying at it, but it's difficult. It's definitely difficult because you're just dealing with people's feelings, and who do you appeal to, and how do you appeal to them is going to be a tricky tightrope to walk. Woo! All right. Well, we got to the 1 hour 30 mark, which is kind of like perfect. We covered most of the topics that we wanted to cover. Is there anything we want to say before we end this discussion? All right, we nailed it. Like and subscribe if you like this podcast. Support the channel by going to goldfishmerch.com and buying our beautiful, beautiful playmats stapled to Richard's wall. And until next time, friends, see ya!